The envelope sat in Zeke Harmon's hands like it weighed more than paper should. Outside the courthouse, the sun was too bright for what he felt inside. Cameras hovered at a distance. People whispered as if he could not hear them. Simone stood beside him, still as a blade, watching everything. Zeke's fingers tightened around the flap. He did not open it yet, because he could still hear her voice in his head, calm and certain. If they try. And now, they had tried. The clip hit social media before Zeke even made it home. A close-up of a white teller leaning over the counter, lips curling. "You're in the wrong bank." Then Zeke, smaller than he should have looked, clutching his envelope like it was his dignity. I'm here to make a payment." And the line that made people sit up in their chairs and feel their stomach twist. "This isn't a place for people like you." The video ended right before the police arrived, like a cliffhanger the bank thought they controlled. But the internet has a way of finishing stories for you. By nightfall, the clip was everywhere. Some people were furious, some people were smug, and some people did what they always do when a black man is humiliated in public. They asked what he did to deserve it. Zeke watched it once. Only once. Then he put the phone down and stared at the kitchen wall like he could erase the sound from the air. Layla padded into the room in socks, half asleep, rubbing her eyes. "Granddad." Zeke turned fast, forcing a smile that did not belong on his face. "You should be in bed, baby." She hesitated, then walked closer, looking at him like she was trying to read a sign that adults never notice they are showing. "I heard you talking to Auntie Simone outside," she whispered. Zeke swallowed. Layla's voice got smaller. "Are we going to lose the house?" That question did not shout. It did not accuse. It just landed, right on his chest. Zeke held her hands in his, warm and small, and he made himself speak steady. "No, we're not." Layla nodded, but her eyes stayed worried. "Kids were saying things at school. They said you got arrested because you were stealing." Zeke felt something rise in him, sharp and hot, and he hated that it had to rise at all. He brushed a thumb across her knuckles. "They can say what they want," he said, "but they don't get to decide who I am." Layla's lip trembled. "But why did they do that to you?" Zeke looked down at the envelope again. "Because some people see my skin before they see me." He did not say it this time. Not yet. He pulled Layla into a hug, and he held her until her breathing slowed. When she finally went back to bed, Zeke stayed at the table alone. He stared at the envelope until the edges blurred, and then his phone buzzed again. "Simone." Zeke answered quietly. "Yeah." Simone's voice was clipped, urgent, controlled. "They're going on the news in the morning." Zeke's jaw tightened. "The bank?" "Yes," Simone said. "They're calling you a fraud suspect. They're framing the clip like security did their job." Zeke closed his eyes. Simone kept going. "They're also pressing charges. They filed it tonight." Zeke's hand tightened around the phone. "Charges for what?" Simone's pause was short, but it carried weight. "Attempted fraud, disorderly conduct, and they're pushing a restraining order to keep you out of the bank." Zeke let out a slow breath through his nose. He was tired, but this tired was not sleep. Tired. This was the tired you get when the world wants you to keep proving you deserve to breathe. Simone's tone softened, just a fraction. "Uncle Zeke, they're trying to bury you in shame before court." Zeke stared at the envelope. Then he said quietly, "I'm not buried." Simone answered, "Good, because we move at first light." Quick question before we go further. Where are you watching from right now, city and state? And if you're here for stories about dignity, fairness, and real accountability, hit like and subscribe. All right, back to Zeke. Morning came with a coldness that did not match the sunshine. Zeke drove with Simone to the courthouse in her car because his own truck had become a magnet. At a red light, a man in the next lane stared at him like Zeke was an animal behind glass. At the next light, a woman rolled down her window just enough to throw words. Thief! Simone's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Zeke kept his eyes forward. He had learned a long time ago that arguing with strangers is like trying to stop rain with your palm. Outside the courthouse, a news van was already parked. A reporter was doing that calm face they do when they're about to turn a human being into a segment. Sources say the suspect attempted to deposit a fraudulent check. Suspect. Zeke stepped out of the car and felt the word try to stick to him like tar. Simone walked beside him, eyes up, shoulders square, as if she was clearing a path just by existing. A microphone appeared in front of Zeke before he even hit the first step. "Sir, are you the man from Cedar Ridge Trust?" Zeke did not answer. Another voice. "Why would you try to scam a bank?" Simone leaned in, voice sharp. "Back up." The reporter blinked. "Ma'am, we're just asking questions." Simone's smile did not reach her eyes. "You're repeating an accusation. That's not a question. That's a weapon." Zeke kept walking. Inside, the courthouse air smelled like old paper and quiet judgment. And there, on a bench near the entrance, sat Colin Stroud. He wore a clean suit, polished shoes, and a relaxed expression that made Zeke's stomach twist. Colin looked up, saw Zeke, and smirked like this was exactly where he wanted him. Colin leaned back as Zeke approached, voice low but loud enough to land. "You should have stayed out of places you don't belong." Zeke stopped. His cane tapped the floor once. Simone stepped forward, calm and deadly. "You done talking, Colin?" Colin's smile widened. "I'm not talking to you." Simone tilted her head. "That's fine. Talk to the judge. Talk to the state. Talk to your own bank board. Just keep talking." Colin's eyes flicked briefly, something like fear trying to hide behind arrogance. Then he stood, and as he brushed past Zeke, he muttered, "They always play victim." Zeke watched him go, and for a moment the shame tried to climb back into his throat. Then he remembered Layla's face. He remembered Nadine's handwriting, and he decided, right there, that shame was not going to live in his body anymore. The hearing was quick, not because the truth was clear, because the machine was greased. The prosecutor stood with a bright tone that did not match his eyes. "Your Honor, the state asks that Mr. Harmon's bond be set. He is a flight risk." Zeke's mouth opened, shocked. Simone rose instantly. "A flight risk? He uses a cane. He's lived in this county for decades. His granddaughter is in school here. This is absurd." The judge, not the same judge as before, looked down over her glasses. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "you understand the charges?" Zeke's voice was steady, but his stomach churned. "I understand the words. I don't understand why they're on me." The prosecutor smiled like he'd been waiting for that. "Because he attempted to defraud a bank, Your Honor, and when confronted, he became disruptive." Disruptive. Zeke could almost hear it being typed into people's minds. Simone spoke calmly. "Your Honor, the bank posted an edited video and called the police before verifying a certified check. They escalated this publicly. That's not procedure. That's targeting." The judge tapped her pen. "I'm setting bond," she said, "and ordering Mr. Harmon to appear in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. 2 weeks of walking around town with fraud stuck to his name. 2 weeks of Layla hearing whispers. 2 weeks of the bank trying to break him quietly. Outside, the reporters were waiting again. This time, the bank had sent their own representative. A woman in a fitted suit, hair perfect, smile polished. "Cedar Ridge Trust takes financial integrity seriously," she said to the cameras. "We regret the incident, but our staff acted in the interest of safety." Safety. Zeke stood there and felt the rage in his chest, not loud, not wild, but deep, because they were calling his presence a danger. Simone leaned in, voice low. "Uncle, don't speak yet. Not today." Zeke's jaw tightened. "So they get to talk?" Simone's eyes held his. "They're building a story. We're building a case." Zeke nodded once. He got into the car without saying a word. And that silence was not surrender. It was restraint. That afternoon, a white SUV rolled slowly past Zeke's house. Zeke noticed because it rolled too slow. A man in the passenger seat held up a phone. filming. Layla was inside doing homework. Zeke stepped onto the porch, tall as he could, cane in hand. The SUV paused. Then the window lowered just enough for a voice to slip out like poison. "You better be gone before the sheriff comes." The window went up. The SUV rolled away. Zeke stood there in the sunlight, hands shaking slightly. Not from fear. From the way disrespect keeps trying to make itself at home. The next morning, the sheriff did come. Not with flashing lights, with paperwork. A foreclosure notice in a plastic sleeve, posted right on Zeke's door where neighbors could see it. Zeke opened the door and froze. The deputy, a white man with a neutral face, cleared his throat. "Mr. Harmon," he said, "I'm just serving what I was told to serve." Zeke stared at the plastic sleeve like it was a slap. Simone arrived 5 minutes later, car door slamming hard. She walked right up, read the notice, and her eyes went cold. "They're moving the timeline," she said. Zeke's voice came out rough. "They're trying to embarrass me in my own street." And there it was. Humiliation scene 1. Clear. Public. Bright daylight. Neighbors peeking through curtains like the show had come to them. Simone turned to the deputy. "Who authorized this?" The deputy shifted. "Ma'am, I don't know. It's filed." Simone pulled out her phone. "You'll know soon." She took a photo of the notice, then angled the camera slightly so it caught the neighbor across the road filming from their driveway. Zeke's stomach clenched. Simone stepped closer to him, voice low. "Uncle, this is what they do. They push shame into the open, so you beg for quiet." Zeke's eyes stayed on the plastic sleeve. Then he said, "I'm not begging." Simone nodded. "Good. Because now you open the envelope." Zeke went inside and sat at the kitchen table like he was bracing for impact. Simone sat opposite him, still, patient. Zeke's fingers trembled as he broke the seal. He unfolded the first page. Nadine's handwriting met him like a hand on his chest. "My love. If they try to shame you, let them." Zeke's throat tightened. He read aloud, voice low. "They love the public stage because they think it keeps you small. But a stage works both ways." Simone's eyes stayed on his face. Zeke turned the page, and his breathing changed. Because this was not just a letter. It was instructions. It was dates, names, attachments listed like a checklist. Zeke swallowed. "Nadine," Simone leaned in. "Keep going." Zeke read. "If you are accused of fraud, do not argue with strangers. Do not beg the bank. Call Simone and go to court. I have already filed what needs to be filed. The rest is timing." Zeke blinked hard. There were copies behind the letter. A sealed complaint, a notarized trust document, a list titled, in Nadine's writing, people they thought would stay quiet. Zeke's voice cracked. "She was doing this while she was sick." Simone nodded once. "Yes?" Zeke's hands tightened on the paper. Then he read the line that changed the air in the room. "The community trust becomes active when they move against you." Simone exhaled slowly. Zeke looked up. "Active how?" Simone reached across the table and tapped the attached page. "It means the trust triggers a legal request for oversight and a freeze on asset movement," Simone said. "It also means we can demand records without waiting for the bank to cooperate." Zeke stared at her. "So she set a trap." Simone's voice was quiet. "She set a mirror. She wanted them to be forced to look at themselves." Zeke's jaw tightened. "And Colin?" Simone slid another page forward. A printout, transaction logs, timestamps, a staff access record. Zeke read the name and felt heat flood his chest. Colin Stroud. Zeke's voice went flat. "He accessed our account before I ever walked in." Simone nodded. "That's twist 1. This wasn't suspicion. This was pre-planned." Zeke stared at the evidence. The shame in his chest began to shift. Because shame is what you feel when you think you did something wrong. But Zeke hadn't done anything wrong. He had been chosen. Simone stood. "Now we move." They drove to Simone's office. The moment Zeke walked in, he saw someone already waiting in the hallway. Tessa Nguyen, the teller. Her shoulders were tight. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying in her car for hours. She looked at Zeke and flinched like she expected him to spit fire. Zeke did not. He simply looked at her and waited. Tessa swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Simone opened her office door. "Come in." Tessa sat, hands twisting together. "I didn't know his plan at first," she said, voice shaking. "I thought it was just bias, that he was being cruel." Zeke's eyes stayed on her. "And then?" Tessa's eyes filled. "Then I saw the list." Simone's voice went soft. "What list?" Tessa pulled out a folded sheet. "I printed it," she said, "before he locked me out." Simone took it and scanned. Her face changed, not shocked, angry in a way that turns into action. Tessa whispered, "It's called dormant recovery. It's mostly older accounts, veterans, widows, people who don't check apps, people who come in with a cane and a trembling hand and hope the world is still decent." Zeke's throat tightened. Tessa's voice shook harder. "They were moving small amounts first, then closing accounts, then blaming customers for being inactive." Simone looked up. "Who approved it?" Tessa hesitated. Then she said it. "Not just Colin." Zeke's eyes narrowed. "Who else?" Tessa swallowed. "Regional director and someone on the board. I only saw initials." Simone's gaze sharpened. "What initials?" Tessa looked down, ashamed. "RB." Zeke blinked. "RB?" Simone's face went still. Then she said quietly, "Randall Bishop." Zeke's stomach dropped. Randall Bishop was a name in town, a respected name, church donor, local businessman, the kind of man people point at and say, "That's how you do it." Zeke's voice came out low. "That man shakes my hand at events." Simone nodded. "That's twist 2 growing teeth. This is bigger than a branch manager." Tessa wiped her face. "I didn't speak up because I was scared. Colin said if I talked, I'd never work in finance again." Simone leaned forward. "And now?" Tessa looked at Zeke. "Now I can't sleep. I keep seeing him standing there while everyone stared. I keep hearing myself say, 'Step aside,' like I was ordering him." Zeke's eyes softened, just a fraction. He understood fear. He understood the way a job can feel like oxygen, but he also understood the cost of silence. Zeke spoke quietly. "Will you tell the truth?" Tessa nodded, tears spilling. "Yes." Simone exhaled. "Good, because they are about to try to crush you too." For the next week, the town felt like it was splitting in two. On one side, people who looked at Zeke and saw a grandfather, a veteran, a man who had been publicly degraded. On the other, people who looked at him and saw an excuse to feel superior. A woman in the grocery store aisle muttered, "These people always pulling the race card." Zeke kept walking. A man at the petrol station said, "Should have stayed in your lane." Zeke kept walking. But the worst was church. Zeke walked in with Layla, holding her hand, trying to keep it normal. Whispers started before he even sat down. Layla squeezed his hand tighter. After the service, a white couple approached him with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Zeke," the man said, too friendly. "Saw you on the news." Zeke nodded politely. The man's smile sharpened. "Embarrassing, huh? Maybe you should have handled your finances better." Layla's fingers tightened. Zeke's jaw clenched. He did not respond, because he could feel Simone's warning in his bones. They want you to explode. They want a clip of you angry. That night, Simone called again. "We've got court in 3 days," she said. Zeke stared at the wall. "And they're going to humiliate me again." Simone's voice was certain. "Yes, they are." Then, quieter, "And that's why we're ready." Court day arrived with a crowd. Not because court was exciting, because people love watching a black man get put in his place. Cameras outside, phones inside. Zeke walked through the doors with Simone beside him, cane tapping steady. In the hallway, Colin stood again, but this time his smile was gone. His eyes darted like he could feel the net tightening. Inside the courtroom, the prosecutor started the performance. "Mr. Harmon," he said, voice bright, "isn't it true you were behind on your mortgage?" Zeke felt the room lean forward. Simone stood. Objection. Relevance. The judge, a black woman with a calm face and sharp eyes, looked over her glasses. "I'll allow it," she said, "for now." Zeke swallowed. The prosecutor smiled like he'd been handed a knife. "And isn't it true," he continued, "that you were desperate for money after your wife passed?" Zeke's throat tightened. The room was quiet, waiting for him to become a stereotype. Simone's voice cut in. "Your Honor, this is humiliation dressed as questioning." The judge's eyes stayed on the prosecutor. "Watch your tone." But the prosecutor didn't stop. He turned to the screen. He played the bank's edited clip again, the one that made Zeke look like trouble. Then he looked at the jury box. "This is what fraud looks like," he said. "Confusion, evasion, and aggression when caught." Aggression. Zeke's hands tightened around his cane. He could hear people whispering behind him. Simone stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said, calm, "may I play the unedited footage?" The prosecutor scoffed. "We've already shown the incident." Simone's tone stayed even. "You've shown a bank's advertisement for its own innocence." The judge's gaze sharpened. "Play it." Simone pressed play. The audio filled the room, the teller's voice, sharp. "You're in the wrong bank." Zeke heard a murmur ripple across the courtroom, then his own timid reply, and then the line again. "This isn't a place for people like you." The courtroom shifted, because now the humiliation was not gossip, it was evidence. Simone paused the video and looked at the judge. "This is humiliation scene 2, Simone said, voice controlled. "Bright, public, clear. The bank did not ask questions. They decided who he was." The prosecutor stood, flustered. "That's not proof of fraud. That's customer service tone." Simone's eyes narrowed. Tone. Interesting word. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we have internal access logs showing Mr. Stroud accessed the Harmon account the night before Mr. Harmon entered the bank." The prosecutor froze. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Do you have those logs?" Simone held up the documents. "Yes." Colin's lawyer stood quickly. "Objection. Foundation." Simone's voice stayed calm. "Foundation is coming." She turned. "Tessa Nguyen." Tessa stepped into the courtroom like she was walking into a storm. She took the stand, hands trembling. Simone approached gently. "Tessa," she said, "did Mr. Stroud instruct you to delay verification?" Tessa swallowed. "Yes." "Did he instruct you to call him before verifying a certified check?" "Yes." "Did he use the phrase, high-risk walk-in?" Tessa blinked, then nodded. "Yes." The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection, hearsay." Simone's eyes stayed on the judge. "It's not hearsay if it's policy." The judge held up a hand. "Overruled. Continue." Tessa's voice steadied. "And there was a list," she added, the words coming faster now that she'd started. "Dormant recovery, mostly older accounts, veterans, widows." The courtroom murmured again. Simone nodded. "And did you see Mr. Stroud's name in access logs?" Tessa's jaw tightened. "Yes, he accessed Mr. Harmon's account before he came in." Colin's lawyer stood again, voice sharp. "This is outrageous." The judge looked at him calmly. "What's outrageous is how often I'm hearing this pattern." Simone stepped back. "And now," she said, "I'd like to call Officer Daniel Reyes." A shift ran through the courtroom. Officer Reyes walked in wearing a suit, not a uniform. He raised his right hand, swore in, and sat. The prosecutor frowned. "Why is an officer testifying in a banking matter?" Simone's voice stayed steady. "Because he's not just an officer." Reyes looked at the judge. "I'm assigned to a state financial crimes task force," he said. "We've been investigating Cedar Ridge Trust for months." The courtroom went still. That was twist 3. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Prosecutor, were you aware the bank was under investigation?" The prosecutor's face tightened. Your Honor, Reyes continued, voice calm, factual. The bank has a pattern of freezing accounts, misclassifying deposits, and escalating law enforcement involvement when customers resist internal transfers. Simone asked quietly, and who authorized the dormant recovery program? Reyes paused. Then he said, regional oversight, board-level sign-off. We have evidence of communications indicating involvement beyond Mr. Stroud. The judge's gaze shifted, sharp. Names. Reyes looked down at his notes, then up again. Randall Bishop, he said. A gasp, not loud but real, because Randall Bishop was not supposed to be a villain. Simone nodded once, like she'd been waiting for the room to catch up. Zeke sat very still. He remembered Randall's handshakes, Randall's smiles, Randall's God bless you at community events, and he felt something cold settle inside him. The prosecutor stood again, panicked. Your Honor, this is turning into a civil matter. This is not relevant to the fraud charge. The judge's voice was calm, but it carried weight. It becomes relevant when the accusation was used to cover the bank's own behavior. Simone turned to Zeke, who was still holding the envelope, now open, papers stacked. Uncle, she whispered, it's time. Zeke stood slowly. The courtroom watched him like they were waiting for him to crumble. Zeke didn't. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, he said, voice steady. My wife left a letter, and attachments. The judge nodded. Proceed. Zeke opened to the final page, Nadine's handwriting again. If you are reading this in court, then they chose pride over decency. Zeke swallowed. Then he read. I am releasing the sealed packet filed with the clerk's office to be opened only if my husband is accused of fraud, arrested, or publicly shamed by this institution. Simone placed a sealed envelope on the clerk's desk. The judge's eyes sharpened. What is that? Simone answered. A court-filed packet, sealed under Nadine Harmon's request. It contains her documentation, recordings, and legal instruments. The clerk opened it carefully and handed it to the judge. The judge read silently for a moment. Her face changed, not shocked, disgusted. Then she looked up. Mr. Harmon, she said, this is extensive. Zeke's throat tightened. She was thorough. The judge's voice hardened. More than thorough. She was protective. The prosecutor stared, mouth slightly open. Colin's lawyer sat down slowly, like his knees had forgotten how to hold him. And then the judge read one line out loud. Activation of the Nadine Harmon Community Trust with authority to compel audit and oversight. Colin's head snapped up. No, he whispered, not loud, but the microphone caught it anyway. The judge looked directly at him. Mr. Stroud, you will not speak unless spoken to. Colin's face drained. The judge continued. This also contains an audio recording. Simone's eyes flicked to Zeke, a quick look that said, here comes the final twist. Zeke's pulse hammered, because he had not known about an audio recording. The judge pressed play. The courtroom filled with a voice, Colin's voice, comfortable, private, cruel. She took the stand, hands trembling. Simone approached gently. Tessa, she said, did Mr. Stroud instruct you to delay verification? Tessa swallowed. Yes. Did he instruct you to call him before verifying a certified check? Yes. Did he use the phrase, high-risk walk-in? Tessa blinked, then nodded. Yes. The prosecutor jumped up. Objection, hearsay. Simone's eyes stayed on the judge. It's not hearsay if it's policy. The judge held up a hand. Overruled. Continue. Tessa's voice steadied. And there was a list, she added, the words coming faster now that she'd started. Dormant recovery, mostly older accounts, veterans, widows. The courtroom murmured again. Simone nodded. And did you see Mr. Stroud's name in access logs? Tessa's jaw tightened. Yes, he accessed Mr. Harmon's account before he came in. Colin's lawyer stood again, voice sharp. This is outrageous. The judge looked at him calmly. What's outrageous is how often I'm hearing this pattern. Simone stepped back. "And now," she said, "I'd like to call Officer Daniel Reyes." A shift ran through the courtroom. Officer Reyes walked in wearing a suit, not a uniform. He raised his right hand, swore in, and sat. The prosecutor frowned. "Why is an officer testifying in a banking matter?" Simone's voice stayed steady. "Because he's not just an officer." Reyes looked at the judge. "I'm assigned to a state financial crimes task force," he said. "We've been investigating Cedar Ridge Trust for months." The courtroom went still. That was twist 3. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Prosecutor, were you aware the bank was under investigation?" The prosecutor's face tightened. "Your Honor, Reyes continued, voice calm, factual. "The bank has a pattern of freezing accounts, misclassifying deposits, and escalating law enforcement involvement when customers resist internal transfers." Simone asked quietly, "And who authorized the dormant recovery program?" Reyes paused. Then he said, "Regional oversight, board-level sign-off. We have evidence of communications indicating involvement beyond Mr. Stroud." The judge's gaze shifted, sharp. "Names." Reyes looked down at his notes, then up again. "Randall Bishop," he said. A gasp, not loud but real, because Randall Bishop was not supposed to be a villain. Simone nodded once, like she'd been waiting for the room to catch up. Zeke sat very still. He remembered Randall's handshakes, Randall's smiles, Randall's "God bless you" at community events, and he felt something cold settle inside him. The prosecutor stood again, panicked. "Your Honor, this is turning into a civil matter. This is not relevant to the fraud charge." The judge's voice was calm, but it carried weight. "It becomes relevant when the accusation was used to cover the bank's own behavior." Simone turned to Zeke, who was still holding the envelope, now open, papers stacked. "Uncle," she whispered, "it's time." Zeke stood slowly. The courtroom watched him like they were waiting for him to crumble. Zeke didn't. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "my wife left a letter, and attachments." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Zeke opened to the final page, Nadine's handwriting again. "If you are reading this in court, then they chose pride over decency." Zeke swallowed. Then he read, "I am releasing the sealed packet filed with the clerk's office to be opened only if my husband is accused of fraud, arrested, or publicly shamed by this institution." Simone placed a sealed envelope on the clerk's desk. The judge's eyes sharpened. "What is that?" Simone answered. "A court-filed packet, sealed under Nadine Harmon's request. It contains her documentation, recordings, and legal instruments." The clerk opened it carefully and handed it to the judge. The judge read silently for a moment. Her face changed, not shocked, disgusted. Then she looked up. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "this is extensive." Zeke's throat tightened. She was thorough. The judge's voice hardened. More than thorough. She was protective. The prosecutor stared, mouth slightly open. Colin's lawyer sat down slowly, like his knees had forgotten how to hold him. And then the judge read one line out loud. "Activation of the Nadine Harmon Community Trust with authority to compel audit and oversight." Colin's head snapped up. "No," he whispered, not loud, but the microphone caught it anyway. The judge looked directly at him. "Mr. Stroud, you will not speak unless spoken to." Colin's face drained. The judge continued. "This also contains an audio recording." Simone's eyes flicked to Zeke, a quick look that said, "Here comes the final twist." Zeke's pulse hammered, because he had not known about an audio recording. The judge pressed play. The courtroom filled with a voice, Colin's voice, comfortable, private, cruel. "You know why this works?" Colin said on the recording. "Because when they're old and black, they don't fight back. They just get embarrassed and disappear." A murmur rose, louder this time, then Colin again. "And if they make noise, we call the cops. Makes them look guilty. Works every time." Zeke's stomach turned. The judge stopped the audio and looked at Colin like she could see every lie he'd ever wrapped in a smile. Colin's lawyer stood up, frantic. "Your Honor, we object to the admission of this recording." The judge's voice was ice. "On what grounds?" the lawyer stammered. It's prejudicial." The judge nodded slowly. "Yes, the truth often is." Colin's mouth opened and closed. He looked around the courtroom like he expected someone to save him. No one moved. Then Simone spoke, calm and final. "And now, Your Honor, the trust instrument." She handed over documents. The judge read again. And then she said the words that made the whole room inhale. "This indicates controlling authority transfers to Ezekiel Harmon as trustee." Colin's face went gray. Zeke felt the air shift, not like victory, but like gravity changing direction. The judge looked at Zeke. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "your wife built a legal mechanism that activates when your rights are violated." Zeke's voice was quiet. "She built it because she knew they would do this." The judge nodded. Then she turned to the prosecutor. "I am dismissing the fraud charge against Mr. Harmon," she said, immediately. A wave of relief hit Zeke so hard his knees softened, but the judge was not finished. She looked at Reyes. "Officer Reyes," she said, "I'm ordering a full audit. I'm referring this matter to the Attorney General, and I want names." Reyes nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at Colin. "Mr. Stroud, you are no longer a witness in this court. You are a subject." Colin's lawyer whispered something to him urgently. Colin didn't move. He looked like a man realizing shame has a return address. Outside the courthouse, the cameras waited again. But this time, the story was different. Zeke walked out beside Simone, shoulders squared. The same reporter shoved a microphone at him. "Mr. Harmon, do you have a comment?" Zeke looked at the camera. He thought about Layla. He thought about Nadine. He thought about how shame tries to make you hide. And he decided he would not hide. His voice was calm. "They tried to shame me in public," Zeke said, "so I'm holding them accountable in public." The reporter blinked, caught off guard by how quiet power can sound. Zeke continued, "I'm not here to destroy the town. I'm here to protect the people in it. Seniors, veterans, widows, anybody who walks into a bank with a cane and hopes they won't be treated like a crime." Simone stepped forward. "And for anyone who watched that clip and wondered what he did to deserve it," she said, voice sharp, "ask the bank what they did to plan it." That line traveled. It traveled fast. Over the next week, more people came forward. An older woman with shaking hands who said her account vanished. A veteran who said the bank lost his deposit. A widow who said she was talked down to until she cried. The bank tried to apologize. But it was the kind of apology that still blames you for feeling hurt. "We regret any discomfort." Discomfort. Zeke read that line on his phone and felt his jaw tighten. Discomfort is when your shoes are too tight. Humiliation is when you're treated like you don't belong in your own country. A week later, Zeke received a request to attend a board meeting. He almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the same building that tried to shrink him now needed him to sit at their table. Simone drove him there. Zeke wore his pressed denim jacket, the one that looked like he respected himself. Because he did. The boardroom was bright, glass walls, soft chairs, water bottles that cost too much. Men in suits shifted when Zeke walked in. They looked at his cane first, then his face, then away. Zeke sat at the head of the table because Simone guided him there without asking permission. A man cleared his throat. "Mr. Harmon," he said, "we'd like to begin by apologizing for the misunderstanding." Zeke stared at him. Then he spoke calmly. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan." Silence. Zeke continued. "You called me the wrong kind of customer. You called the police before you verified a certified check. You posted an edited video and tried to turn me into a warning." The men shifted in their seats. Zeke leaned forward slightly. "My wife didn't leave me revenge," he said. She left me responsibility. Simone slid a folder across the table. Zeke looked down at it, then back up. Here's what's going to happen, he said. Every dormant account you touch gets audited. Every senior you took from gets repaid. You're going to publish an apology that uses real words, not corporate fog. And you're going to fund a community protection program for elders and veterans. A board member swallowed. Mr. Harmon, that's a lot. Zeke's eyes stayed steady. So was the harm. Another man tried to smile. We can negotiate. Zeke's voice stayed calm. No, you can comply, Simone added quietly. Or we can make it public in a way your shareholders won't survive. The room went still. That afternoon, Randall Bishop resigned from the board, not because he suddenly grew a conscience, because the truth was louder than his reputation. Colin Stroud was fired the next day, publicly, not quietly, because quiet consequences are for people who never had to be humiliated loudly. Zeke did not celebrate. He went home. He sat at the kitchen table. Layla walked in after school and froze when she saw him. Granddad, she whispered, did you win? Zeke looked at her. He thought about how winning is not always fireworks. Sometimes winning is simply not being broken. He nodded. We're not losing the house. Layla's shoulders dropped like she'd been holding them up all week. She walked over and hugged him hard. Zeke held her back, eyes closed. Layla pulled away and looked at him, serious. So they were wrong about you, Zeke nodded. They were wrong about what they could do to us. Layla frowned. Are they going to say sorry? Zeke let out a slow breath. He thought about apologies, how they sound different when they come from fear. We'll see, he said. The next morning, a letter arrived. Not the bank's letter, a plain envelope, no return address. Zeke stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a single sheet, typed, no signature, one line. You think the branch was the whole bank? Zeke's fingers tightened. Simone arrived 10 minutes later after Zeke called her. She read it, eyes narrowing. They're trying to scare you, she said. Zeke looked at the paper, then at her. And are you scared? Simone's mouth twitched. No, Zeke nodded once. Me neither, he said. He walked to the bin and dropped the paper in without ceremony. Then he turned back to Simone. What's next? Simone smiled, small and real. Now we finish it properly, she said, not with vengeance, with protection. Weeks later, Cedar Ridge Trust announced changes, real changes, not just words, a third-party audit, an elder services desk with trained staff, a veteran deposit verification line that did not involve police, a restitution fund, a public board meeting where community members could speak. Zeke attended, not as a guest, as a reminder. A white woman stood at the microphone, trembling, and said, I watched that video. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry. Zeke nodded, not forgiving her instantly, but acknowledging that honesty is where redemption starts. Tessa took the microphone too. Her voice shook. I participated, she said, not because I hated him, but because I was afraid. And I learned something. Fear doesn't excuse harm. Zeke looked at her, and he saw a young person choosing a better spine. That mattered. When the meeting ended, Simone walked Zeke outside. The sun was bright again, but this time, it didn't feel insulting. Zeke leaned on his cane and looked up at the sky for a moment. Simone spoke quietly. Your wife would be proud. Zeke swallowed. She saved me, he said. Simone shook her head gently. No, she said. She believed you would stand up. She just made sure you had the tools. Zeke nodded slowly. At home that night, Layla sat beside him on the sofa, watching him like she was watching history happen in a living room. Granddad, she said, are people going to stop doing that now? Zeke looked at her and chose his words carefully. Some people won't, he said. Some people will always try to make you feel small so they can feel big. Layla's eyes narrowed. Then what do we do? Zeke smiled, tired but real. We don't carry their shame, he said. We carry our truth. Layla leaned into him. And we don't stay quiet, she whispered. Zeke felt his chest tighten, because that was the real wrap-up. Not court, not headlines. A child learning that dignity is not something anyone grants you. It's something you refuse to drop. If this story moved you, share it with someone who's ever been judged in a place they were supposed to be safe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been treated like you didn't belong somewhere you had every right to be? Because here's the lesson Zeke learned, and it's one too many people learned too late. When a system uses shame as a weapon, it's counting on your silence. But shame breaks when truth meets daylight, and real accountability starts the moment you decide you're not going to shrink anymore.